founder and CEO of SPS, and it's been 10 years since you've been running this business.
Yep.
Can we rewind a little bit? Take it back to the early days. Why did you start SPS?
So yeah, every story from an entrepreneur will be different, and it's always a very personal journey. So for me, I never really thought of myself as an entrepreneur.
What did you think of yourself as?
I was very happily employed. I was working in the private equity industry. I had the best boss and that you could ask for, and I was working for a company that I felt was growing and was allowing me to grow, but life doesn't always work out as you plan. And quite suddenly I found myself exploring next steps in my career. And as I was interviewing and talking to people, I literally had that light bulb moment where I had a business idea. Quite simple in that instead of doing what I did for this private equity firm, which was very data intensive, process oriented around their deal sourcing and business development, could I figure out a way to get a team going and offer it to many different firms at a fraction of the cost of what it would take to hire my team customized for their market.
What was the light bulb moment? And then walk me through those early months, early days of that.
You know what? There's no specific light bulb moment. There wasn't that one. I was just sitting around. It was a very natural, organic evolution as I was interviewing, looking for work, basically, or exploring different opportunities.
You were discussing what you had done
exactly
at the previous firm
and
how much data you were focusing on, and then you're like,
how it would help them, and they'd be like, that's really interesting, but we're not hiring right now, but that's really interesting. So somewhere along the conviction it gave me that there was something there, and this is during the financial crisis where the job market, there was a lot of hiring freezes.
Yeah.
So sometimes, just the circumstances compel you.
How many interviews were you doing and kind of facing that, even that maybe disappointment, oh God, this is going nowhere? And then did you have that moment where it was, screw it, I'm just going to do this myself, and I have to do this. I know this is risky, but I have to do this.
Yeah.
Or am I just making up a story that wasn't there?
No, there was tons of. No, you're pretty close. You're pretty close. You're an entrepreneur yourself, and you've talked to many others, so it's some version of the same story at the end of the day. But yeah, for us, tons of meetings, calls, interviews. I had 2 little kids. I was living in Manhattan, and I felt the pressure to find the next thing that I wanted to do. So there was a lot of meetings and calls, and it wasn't a sense of frustration. It was just a realization that there's an opportunity here that for some reason, my prior experience having worked for Thomson Reuters, helping them build information products and databases, or what's now a division of Thomson Reuters, and in a private equity firm, and seeing where the gaps are, I was like that person in that position at that time. Like no one else was talking to these other private equity firms and saying, you should do this. And they were saying, yeah, that's really interesting.
So what was it? What did you actually create in the first? What did you actually create in the first couple of months?
Oh my gosh!
What was the product?
The product, really, really simply, I was tracking data by night in an Excel file on private equity and M&A transactions that got done from.
Like what type of data?
The deal activity. Really basic, literally picture an Excel file with 30 columns. Each row is a deal that trades, and building a database of private equity and closed deals. And so doing that, and then
how did you find private data, and how did all the data start to come together? Were you calling the sponsors that, hey, was that 4 times or 5 times?
No, we were calling on sponsors during the day. My day job was to call on sponsors and sell them the idea that they should use this data and then build some metrics and analytics around them around their deal sourcing. But the data collection itself, that's something I've been doing for 20 years in my career at this point. It's not something I brag about at parties. It's not cool or anything, but yeah, I just getting that private.
Doesn't get you invited to more parties?
No, it's okay.
So walk me through the first year of business.
First,
and when you knew that you actually had something that was worth convincing your wife that you should get another year to do it?
The first year of business is the most challenging and the most exhilarating at the same time. And it's funny you should say convincing my wife. I'm one of the lucky ones where I had that moment, if you will, the gut check. Do I really want to do this? Maybe I should just take that job offer that maybe is coming around the corner. And I remember communicating this, and at that time we didn't have a steady source of income, so we had a lot of credit card debt.
Did she work, or was it?
No, she wasn't working at that time. So we had 2 little kids at home, and so we had a lot of credit card debt. At a point where most people would be uncomfortable.
This is like 2009 too.
Yes, 2009, and I remember coming to her and saying, in a couple of months things are going to get pretty ugly, and almost wishing that she would be like, you know what, this was a nice experiment. Why don't you? It's time to find a job. But and it's amazing how all she had to say was that, and my trajectory would have been completely different. Instead, her 3 words were, "Bring it on." And she saw in me the conviction, the passion, the happiness, and thankfully, just naturally, she's not averse to risk at all. So having the right partner and support is critical. So and then 2 months later,
Go ahead.
sorry, 2 months later we got our first client, and we were off and running. So that's how close it can be in life.
That reminds me of June 2016, when my wife and I were sitting on the back patio of our apartment overlooking like a open air commercial garage, and I'm just like, what the heck am I doing?
Right.
Like, you're pregnant. I'll go get a job. It's perfectly fine.
Right.
And she said, no, you have to start something.
Right.
And it's amazing how important a partner is, whether it's the person we're married to, boyfriend, girlfriend, our family, our friends are, to kind of give us that different nudge and say, no, you actually need to do this. And it might not be for 10 years or 3 years, but to have, hey, just give me a little bit of runway.
So true.
So what was it like emotionally for you and the family in that first year?
Gosh, there's so much excitement and enthusiasm mixed in with concern and fear.
How old were your kids?
6 months and a little over 2 years. Yeah, we just bought an apartment in Manhattan, so in a sense, life was good, but it sounds, based on the circumstances, that it was a very scary situation. Maybe objectively it was, but a combination of my wife's attitude, my own attitude, we always took a very healthy, perspective on things.
So, to kind of dive a little bit deeper into the emotions of, or maybe the what it takes to be an entrepreneur. What are some of the emotional traits that you think are common among all entrepreneurs?
Man, that's a really good question. For me, entrepreneurship is a very personal experience, and I have been in the position and continue to be in the position where I ask successful CEOs or entrepreneurs for their advice and guidance and these kind of questions. And now I'm also at the point where I can offer it to others as well that are starting out. So it's a very personal question, and the path that you have to create is going to be one that hasn't been created before. You can definitely learn, and you have to find as much good advice and information and data, but ultimately that path has to be a path that hasn't been taken before. So it's a balance. I feel, for me, it's been a balance of knowing that you need a lot of information and a lot of other people that have gone through this or collect data, but then there's also a point where that's enough information. I got it. Now you just have to do something. You have to take the step that's not been taken before.
The moment of absolute certainty will never arrive.
No.
Like
The only certainty is hindsight. The only certainty you get is in hindsight. So
it's interesting to kind of think about the the fine line between trusting your gut and going in a direction that you believe you should in an entrepreneurial path with delusion.
Right.
And looking at data and like, no, this doesn't make any sense. You should actually completely not do this.
Yes.
Versus that entrepreneurial intuition is like, well, I see the data,
Right.
but I'm still going to do this.
Right.
And listen, team, we're going in this direction.
Right.
So kind of maybe jumping forward a little bit, and maybe we can kind of continue to walk and talk on this beautiful day in Manhattan. What's kind of after the first stage, like the startup phase, how would you define the next phase of SPS in the 10-year history?
So this goes back to my earlier theme about it being a very personal journey. For me and my approach, fundamentally, in hindsight, I can say with certainty, I did not seek outside capital. We didn't raise any money. We didn't,
Are you glad that you did that?
Yeah, I can definitely see pros and cons of both sides, but it comes to your personality, I didn't feel like that while I was growing my business and putting it out there and selling this product and generating revenue, to try to meet with dozens of investors and also pitch them about this concept that I had conviction in and try to raise, it just felt like it would be too much of a distraction.
Did you try it all?
I didn't try. Never tried. So my philosophy was very simple, old-fashioned. You spend money, and this is the one biggest takeaway I try to tell the entrepreneurs. And this is not, there's definitely a lot of VC money out there, and maybe we would have succeeded faster with the right VC partners, but you don't have a company until you've generated revenue. So focus more on, and it doesn't have to be a perfect product, a perfect sale, but get the conviction. Start bringing in cash before you start spending cash. For me, that's my philosophy. I'm not saying that's going to be right for everyone. So that's pretty much governed all the phases of SPS in the last 10 years. So what do I mean by that? We slowly hired more employees. I'm a data guy, I'm a research guy, so I did that. And then the first hires were, let somebody else do that so I can do more of sales. And once we got enough clients, I was both the sales and the client service guy. Then let's hire some client service people so I can do more sales and strategy. Then we hired sales. And so that's been my approach. I do as much as I can until we can afford to have a team do it, do it independently and free up my time. So that's been my path. And that's not what you're gonna hear from someone that raised a lot of millions of dollars.
I think it also depends on the industry that you're in and the specific type of business model that you're trying to run.
Correct.
Some do need VC to get the objectives they have.
Yes.
But I think a lot of people just kind of blindly go into it. This makes me think a lot about a discussion I had with one of my close friends. Is like, what are you trying to optimize for with your business?
Right.
With what are you trying to accomplish in life?
Right.
Like, do you need to run a $100 million, $400 million company to accomplish what you want to do in life?
Right.
If you run a small business
right.
with a small team, but guess what? Your whole team's happy. You're really adding value in the marketplace,
right.
and you're running a business that you love.
And the other thing I would mention for me about this, the question of the VC, and it was a very emotional question. I genuinely had conviction, of this company. I had a vision. I had a dream. This was going to happen to me. And the very notion, maybe I did have an initial, I don't remember one, but maybe I did talk to a potential investor or just get their idea. But the very notion of someone telling me that might not happen or that might not be worthwhile, I wanted to protect my dream, and I knew I would have to, 45 people would tell me that that's crazy and then find that one person. So when you're already putting yourself out there and it's so emotional and you believe in it, and maybe this is risky, if you believe it in enough, I wanted to protect that belief, and I just wasn't willing to hear from VC after VC that this, that's interesting, but no thank you type of thing.
So where are we at today? 10 years into this, what does the next year look like?
So today, we're going through that phase where, the next phase of growth, like we're profitable. We have a client base, growing client base of over 100 companies. We've poured a lot of money into product development, IT, to go from that 10-year ago Excel file model to a very modern looking user interface, a very sophisticated set of automation and technology that our clients can use. And we've put a lot of money into that, all organically generated from revenue over the last 3 years. And now we're going to continue to refine the product, develop the product. So the next stage for us is to continue to improve the product and improve the number of clients on the private equity side, which is our core market, that will benefit from our service. So if we have over 100 today, let's get to over 200. So that's scaling that and reaching that to its maximum potential. And then we're also at the point where we're innovating. So we've launched a product over the last year for the broader M&A ecosystem, for investment banks, for attorneys, for lenders. And after a lot of interviewing and research and going for that. So now we've had a handful of successes there as well. And we're looking to build out a sales team for that. So the next stage of our growth is to improve and maximize potential of that core product for the private equity market that we have, and use that as a launching pad to go the entire M&A, all the different industries that private equity tests, investment banks, M&A advisor, law firms, accountants, with a similar product, but geared for their market. So that's what the next stage of our growth is.
Well, maybe to wrap this first vlog up, how did you and your wife celebrate when you got that first check from your first client?
Oh man, I don't remember what we did to celebrate, but I remember the feeling of verbally closing the first client after 6 months of, I'd never sold anything in my life. After 6 months of pitches and literally reading books like Closing for Dummies, those yellow books, and how you do that, and after dozens of conversations, over 50, maybe 100. I remember I was in Philadelphia, private equity firm. The decision makers were in the conference room, talking, deliberating, and one of the people walks me out and he said, "You can call your wife, let her know you made your first sale today." And it was just the greatest feeling. I called her and I explained to her exactly what happened, and quite coincidentally, with that day or the next day, we also got our second client, and we were off and running.
There it is. Many more vlogs to come.